A very warm good morning, all of you. Am I audible?
Yes.
So, I thought of sharing with you a journey that has fascinated me a lot. As a student of law, the journey of the Indian Constitution, I feel is an incredible journey which all citizens of the country, all students, in fact, all citizens of the world should know the incredible journey of the Indian Constitution. That is what I'm here to share with you. So, the basics, you all know, Indian Constitution. There was a Constituent Assembly after India got independent. The Constituent Assembly worked for over 2 years. The Indian Constitution was framed. It's called a bag of borrowings for a reason. It's called a bag of borrowings because it encapsulates the best practices of the world. We have taken some of the very important best practices, like, for example, from the United States Constitution, which is amongst the most celebrated constitutions of the world. We have fundamental rights that we have taken from them. We have taken the directive principles of state policy from Ireland. We have taken liberty, fraternity from French. We have very interesting features in our Indian Constitution which are from best constitutions of the world. But let me tell you a little bit about our Constitution. It's not the little red book that I'm carrying here with me today. It's not the text that you would have read. To see the original Constitution, you have to see it is a handwritten document in beautiful calligraphy, which is decorated with the 4,000 years of cultural and heritage of India. It has beautiful photographs and pictures, all hand painted by Nandlal Bose and his disciples in Shantivan. It is kept in a helium box in a library in the Parliament of India, and I recommend all of you to have a look at that original Constitution. The chapter about the directive principles of state policy. So I must tell you something about this chapter. I find this chapter to be one of the most fascinating chapters of the Indian Constitution. This is a chapter which said that where is it that we would like our country to go? Our founding fathers, the Constituent Assembly, when they framed the Constitution, India was a nascent democracy. We were a new breed. We were an ancient nation, but a new democracy. And coming together of so many sovereign states, cutting away from the British Raj. So we were completely in a different frame of mind as a country. And there were lots of things that we wanted to do, we aspired to do as a country, but we couldn't do immediately. So that chapter is something that we have taken from Ireland, which is directive principles of state policy, which command the direction in which the state should go. Now the recent example that one specific right that has moved from directive principles of state policy to fundamental rights is secured from day one. From the day our Constitution came into being, these are the basic fundamental human rights which are available to every citizen. In fact, a lot of the fundamental rights are available even to non-citizens who live in India. So that is the beauty of our fundamental rights. So the last right to move from directive principles of state policy to fundamental rights was the right to education. That India could not have full, free, compulsory primary education for all our children when we were a new country. But we realized that dream down the line, and that moved from directive principles to a fundamental right. So that just one example of how things have shaped into our Constitution. I must also tell you that this journey of the Indian Constitution, the directive principles of state policy chapter, the picture on top is the Gita Upadesh that Lord Krishna is giving to Arjun at Kurukshetra. There is Akbar, there is Tipu Sultan, there is Mahabharata, there is Ramayana, there is Himalayas, there is Natraj, there is deserts, the oceans of our country. So those beautiful pictorial depiction that we see in the original Constitution, unfortunately it's not there in the bare acts of Constitution that we have, but there are original copies of the original Constitution, handwritten Constitution, which I recommend everyone should read and see. Then the Constitution came into being, a beautiful Constitution. But how did the Constitution work itself out? What happened in the last 70 years? The the constitution was enacted. We had initially property. To give you another example, property was a fundamental right to start with. But then India needed land reforms. India needed to shed the Jagirdari system. India needed to empower the people who were tilling the lands. So what does India do? The Constitution Amendment comes and property is taken away from there. So this large-scale land reforms come in the 50s and 60s decade for India. Validity is challenged in the Supreme Court. Like we have a vibrant judiciary, so it is challenged and Supreme Court says, no, it can be amended and it is a correct amendment. And we had, India followed the socialist pattern for a while. So it was acceptable. Interestingly, thereafter, there was a little tussle period between the executive and the judiciary. I must tell you about that also. So, in the Indian system, constitution is supreme. Nobody is above the constitution. That is like the grand norm of our system, grand norm for our country. And the job of interpreting the constitution is given to the Supreme Court of India. Now, Parliament wanted to exert pressure and take some control and power onto itself. Parliament is sovereign in its own right in lawmaking, legislature, that is their domain. So Parliament made a law. Supreme Court gave a judgment saying that after the right to property was removed, there was another case and Supreme Court in one of the cases said that fundamental rights cannot be amended even by an amendment in the Constitution. So the Parliament decided to assert itself. When the Parliament asserted itself, they said, they amended the Constitution to say that any amendment that is made in the Constitution cannot be challenged in a court of law. Now, India has a system of judicial review. That also we have taken from the US. That every law that is made in the country has to meet the benchmark of being sacrosanct with the fundamental rights, which is part 3 of the Constitution. So when Parliament made this amendment, it was challenged again. That is when the most celebrated judgment of Supreme Court came, of 13 judges, Constitution Bench of Supreme Court, which we know as Aishwarya Bhati case or the basic structure case. When Parliament said that they can amend part 3 of the Constitution also by a constitutional amendment, Supreme Court propounded a theory of basic structure. They said, yes, the fundamental rights can be amended, but there is a basic structure of our Constitution. And since the Parliament itself draws its power from the Constitution, the Parliament cannot make an amendment, which amendment will take away the basic structure or abrogate or diminish the basic structure in any manner. So, institutional balance is what I am trying to tell you. I must tell you a converse story also here. The times of emergency were extremely trying times for our country. We went through national emergency, fundamental rights were suspended, right to life itself was suspended. Again, the courts of law were knocked at. And 9 high courts across the country, in one voice, said that right to life cannot be suspended during an emergency. Many of us youngsters may not be able to appreciate what emergency was, but just about anybody and everybody could be picked up from wherever you are, from your homes, from your offices, from the roadside, and booked in the prison without any access to judiciary, because right to life was suspended during emergency. When 9 high courts said it cannot be done, Supreme Court said, no, it can be done. Right to life can be suspended during emergency, and that judgment is known as one of the darkest hours of Supreme Court. But do you know when Supreme Court was in the darkest hour, who took the country out of that again? The Parliament this time stood up. The Parliament brought the 42nd Constitutional Amendment to say that if ever there is an emergency, national emergency in the country again, rights to other fundamental rights can be suspended for the time being if there's an emergency. But right to life can never ever be suspended in an emergency. See the beauty of the institutional balance. So when the governments fail, when the Parliament does not fulfill the aspirations of the country, the Supreme Court as interpreter of the Constitution stands up. The institutional balance system mechanism makes sure that things are moving in a smooth manner. It is an interesting journey. Now let me tell you something more. That judgment that I'm telling you about, ADM 444, that got overruled recently, just a year back in the privacy judgment of Supreme Court. Supreme Court said that that judgment was wrong, and a larger combination of the Constitution bench of Supreme Court said that that judgment was incorrect now. Some more things that Supreme Court has done in the recent past. See, it's an evolving journey. The best thing about our Constitution is it's a dynamic document. It's an organic document. It is not a document like, many of us would believe that law books are cold and rude and, letters of law are very, very, but it's very exciting. It's very vibrant. It is very dynamic. We just need to see how the journey is. 40 years back, Supreme Court said adultery is fine. It is fine to be there as a crime in the Indian Penal Code. 40 years later, interestingly, son of the same father who was on the bench then, who was on the bench this time, now today's morality of India, today's journey of India cannot permit this definition of adultery, which is hugely biased towards women. Because the definition of adultery that we had was if you had a sexual intercourse with a person's wife without his consent or connivance, that was adultery. So Supreme Court said this cannot stand. 40 years back, they said it can. It's fine. 40 years later, no. Section 377, Supreme Court said, once it said Section 377 is consenting sexual relationships between two consenting adults. We know it as same-sex relationships in common parlance. First, Supreme Court said, no, it's not the job of the Supreme Court to do anything about it. If the law has to be amended, Parliament will do it. But 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line, Supreme Court said, no, it is inherent to right to live with dignity. Right to live with dignity allows individuals to make sexual choices also. If they are adults, if they are consenting, the state has no business to say that it's a crime. The most largely interpreted constitutional article is probably Article 21, right to life and personal liberty. It's just a one-line article. But you know how many thousands and lakhs and millions of pages it has filled up in interpretation? Now, right to clean environment is inherent in that right to live life and liberty. And that is an article, that is a fundamental right not available just to a citizen. That is available to everybody living in India. It's a very, very interesting journey that we have gone through. Hussain Ara Khatun was a judgment where a PIL was brought in. Now, PIL also I must tell you a little about. Public interest litigation is a phrase that is coined by the Indian judiciary. It does not exist anywhere else in the world. It is a very unique feature because otherwise the way judiciary works is that it has to be your case. You have to be aggrieved. There is a very strong stance of locus standi. If you are aggrieved, you go to the court and you ask for your rights to be upheld. PIL was coined by the Indian judiciary to say that people who are not in a position to uphold their own rights, public interest litigations can be filed for them to make sure that their rights they don't remain an empty formality. What was the point of having these great hallowed principles in our Constitution if we could not make sure that the last man standing in the road or last man standing in the line of the democracy has access to them? So let me tell you the kind of PILs that Supreme Court entertained, the courts of our country entertained, and added to the incredible journey of our Constitution because they interpreted it in this manner. Hussain Ara Khatun was one judgment where in Bihar, there were under trial prisoners who had not been tried, whose trial had not been completed, but they had completed that much period of incarceration that even if they would have been convicted, they would have been let off far earlier. For example, if I was booked as an under trial prisoner for committing theft and maximum punishment, for example, for that kind of offense that I had done was 4 years, I was already inside jail for over 5 years as an under trial without my trial having been completed. So even if I was convicted, I would have been out much earlier. Now, who would have raised a voice for those prisoners but for the public interest litigation? Young children, small children who should be going to school, they were working in hazardous industries, they were working in Shivkashi firecracker factories. And with very, very toxic material, public interest litigation is what liberated them. Environment matters because environment is everybody's, so it is nobody's. So nobody cares for it. So environment matters, the MC Mehta cases, Taj cases, Taj Mahal, protection of Taj Mahal, Ganga, Yamuna. These are incredible cases that the Indian judiciary has entertained and allowed the journey of the constitution to ensure that the rights of the last citizen, of the common citizen, are truly ensured. The rights do not remain an empty formality. I must also give you a little perspective of comparison. We have a brother nation who got independence one day before us, almost 2 sons from the same parent. This is the 3rd constitution that they have, 3 times over. It is an incredible constitution that they have. I found it very interesting to note that while Indian judiciary just 2 years back said that right to privacy was inherent part of fundamental right, in Pakistan constitution it's already stated, privacy is a fundamental right. Right to press, right of press is firmly and freely secured in the Pakistani constitution. In India, it is not stated, but it has been read by Supreme Court as part of the right to speech of a common citizen. So right of press, of a free media, which is the 4th limb of the constitution, has been recognized. But despite having a great constitution, there is one very striking thing about our brother nation. In the last 70 years of their journey, not even a single elected head of the state has been removed by an election. Just see how profound that statement is. Whoever has been elected to office in the last 70 years was never defeated by an election. They were all either killed in office, coup, taken over, or sent to jail. So see how that system is working. There's one more interesting country. I spoke about initially the best constitutions of the world, but you should also know there is an incredible country towards our east, where if you, they don't have Google. So if you go online, they have their own platform, and if you search for Winnie the Pooh, do you know what you get? The contents are not available because of local regulations. The country I'm talking about is China. That they have also had an interesting experience with constitution. There, Winnie the Pooh is not available on internet because in some parts of media, there was a comparison made with the Chinese premier and his mannerisms and the way he is. That comparison was of Winnie the Pooh, the beautiful Disney character, but he's slow and supposedly dumb and like that. So Winnie the Pooh is not available. China has separation of powers, but do you know what is the kind of separation of powers they have? That's 1 mother and 3 sons. So mother is the Communist Party. The courts of law are there, just like our courts of law. But the Politburo members are there in those courts of law to say what to do. So it's important for us to see the journey of our neighboring countries also, then to understand what is the perspective of our country, how far we have gone, what an incredible journey we have had, and how that journey, I feel as a student of law, I strongly feel that it is this incredible journey of our constitution that has really allowed us, each citizen of this country, given us wings, allowed us the liberty to aspire as high as we like, achieve whatever we want to do. Look at where we are standing as a nation today, and how much potential we have, in the next generation. So that was my small endeavor today. I wanted to share this incredible journey, which I feel is a very, very fascinating journey. And I recommend to all of you who are not even law students to please go through this journey of Indian Constitution, both the original Constitution as also the way it has been interpreted. Thank you very much.